Hello, my name is Herb Lassiter.
And I'm Dr. Maryse Nazon, and I'm looking forward to this conversation.
And we're going to have a conversation about the real economic stimulus package that each of us must have. You saw a picture of President Obama, maybe he is called the doctor now, the doctor of the economy, various CEOs he was working with, Dan Rather and the Dalai Lama. What could they possibly have to say to us?
Well, they have a lot to say to us, sir.
And what do they have in common? Well, let's take a look, starting with the picture here. We have the president with several CEOs of major corporations that he brought in. And they told him not only must we correct the business of the numbers and the inventories and the financial needs and so forth, but we must also have a correction in the confidence of people throughout the country. And here we have in the upper right-hand corner a picture of Jack Welch, who's the retired chairman of the General Electric Corporation, a very prominent, famous, and well accomplished entrepreneurial CEO. And he was saying shortly after the election that we must have the ability for the president and the leaders of the government to lead the people into understanding that yes, we can overcome this thing. There must be a resurgence of confidence in order to have results. What about the Dalai Lama and Dan Rather? What do they have to do with all this?
Well, those two have very interesting things to say to us about using our brain, changing our mind, and training our brain to think differently and controlling our temperament. And I think you have something to say about that.
Yes, as a matter of fact, we just happen to have an expert on temperament that we can talk about here. And that's Mr. Warren Buffett himself, who's probably more widely known as the richest man in the world. But when interviewed recently, he said that what he had to learn to control was not so much his attention to the balance sheets and the news of the day and so forth, but he had to learn to control his own temperament so that he's making judgments in a carefully thought out, sound basis. So the control and mastery of temperament is something the richest man had to do in order to become the richest man in the world. Perhaps there's a lesson we can learn from that, how to control our temperaments.
Absolutely. I think it has a lot to helpful hints for us to really control what goes on in our lives.
So let's then talk about, just as he must control his temperament, we're going to learn to control our temperament. So going back to our original picture, then we're saying then that these executives were saying to our chief executive of the federal government that we all must learn to have confidence controlling our temperaments and making decisions based upon what's logical rather than being swept up in a tide of bad news. The Dalai Lama is saying that we're doing some research perhaps to see what we can do to learn to control our minds better and control our temperaments. And Dan Rather has been reporting on that particular assignment.
Yes, he has a wonderful series of videos talking about the impact of training our brain to think more, using more of our left brain versus our right brain. And by increasing the activity in our left brain, we can achieve contentment, happiness, and a lot of other things.
Well, this sounds too good to be true. Are we saying then that we can actually train our brains to devote more energy towards sound judgment?
Absolutely. We can train our brain, change, and the changes that we do in our thoughts consequently is going to affect our temperament, and consequently it affects the very physical structure of our brain.
Interesting possibility. We may have the possibility to be masters of our temperament, just as Mr. Warren Buffett is master of his temperament.
Absolutely. It's possible for each one of us, not just Buffett.
Okay, great. That's encouraging. So maybe President Roosevelt has something to say about this when he said, the only thing we have to fear is fear itself.
Absolutely. I think we have gained a new understanding. So he was kind of prophetic. By changing the thoughts that are associated with our fears, we can control our brain and train our brain to think differently.
So once again, we have these four people who may have more in common than we thought. We have the executive saying to the President of the United States there must be a greater level of confidence in our feelings. Mr. Welch saying we must have a confidence in the area. The Dalai Lama, and as reported by Dan Rather and some other scientists, that we have the ability then to actually learn to manage our brains better, and that gives us the ability to bring on a greater sense of confidence and a stronger temperament to act on logic and judgment rather than on the wave of news that might influence us one way or the other.
Yes, the message is the same. Control, train your brain. It's just said in different ways, but it's the same message.
Okay. So this little baby here, where we talk about the left and right brain, maybe this brain thing is the tool, the basic tool needed for rising beyond the recession's mentality and being able to get a hold of the economic stimulus within each one of us, which then can take full advantage of any external, but perhaps also being able to act even though there may not be an economic stimulus on the outside at various times.
Yes, and we discover more and more that the solution is not outside of us, but within us.
Okay. So there's some things we're going to do to aid and abet this conversation. We'll have a New Thought conversation on Thursday, January 12th, and the 13th, which is of all days, Friday the 13th. And people may pre-register for this free online event by sending an email to herbword@lycos.com. That's herbword, HERBWORD, @lycos.com, LYCOS.com. There will also be a 10-week course online on spiritual economics. How can we develop our own internal spiritual economics center that will then take advantage of the opportunities in any economy. For this too, you can get information, registration information, by emailing herbword, HERBWORD, @lycos.com. So whatever you do, we hope to see you on the free discussion. Let's take a look at the economic stimulus package we must have inside of us to take advantage of anything that's happening on the outside, no matter how it may look in the news from day to day. This is Herb Lassiter,
Dr. Maryse Nazon.
and we're pleased to have had you in this discussion on the real economic stimulus package, the one that takes place inside of you.